Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of KRAD COVID Readings. I'm Keith R.A. DeCandido. This time around, I'm going to be reading the story that introduced one of my original series. In 2019, I put out a novel called A Furnace Sealed, which is book one of the Bram Gold Adventures. Book two of the Bram Gold Adventures, which doesn't have a title yet, is in progress right now, and I'm hoping to have that out sometime in either late 2020 or early 2021, depending. But the world was actually introduced back in 2011 in an anthology called Liar Liar. The Liars Club is a cabal of writers, most of whom are from the Philadelphia area. There are a few of us who are not. One of them who is not, is me. But it's a group of writers who do outreach and workshops and try to basically help out other writers. We run a bunch of writers' coffee houses around the country, including a bunch in eastern Pennsylvania, one out in San Diego, there's one up in New England, and one of these days I'm going to start up one in New York. But we put together a charity anthology that benefited literacy programs called Liar Liar, which included Jonathan Mayberry and Gregory Frost, Keith Strunk, Dennis Tafoya, Solomon Jones, Mary Jones, Kelly Simmons, and a bunch of other people. I'm not remembering everybody right now, but suffice to say, it was released in 2011. And the only consistency in the anthology was that all the stories have to be about falsehoods. It was published by Mendacity Press, and in it I introduced Bram Gold, who is the lead character in The Adventures of Bram Gold, obviously, and it was sort of my test bed for that particular urban fantasy world, which has kicked off a new novel series. So this is the first Bram Gold story, which is called Under the King's Bridge. It was reprinted in Without a License, which is my short story collection, which is the version I'm reading right now. I gotta tell you, if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it. Usually, when commuters come out of the Marble Hill Metro North Station in New York City during evening rush hour, they're rushing up the long, enclosed staircase to get where they're going, like hamsters in those plastic tubes. On this particular Friday afternoon, though, not so much. As I stood there next to the man who wanted to hire me, the mid-July sun bearing down on us, I watched a whole lot of them shamble up the stairs like the title characters in Dawn of the Dead. Not all of them, mind you. Some were doing the usual mad dash, trying to get out of the airlessness of the covered staircase as quickly as possible. They scattered toward the gypsy cabs on 225th Street or one of the bus stops on Broadway, or the shopping center across the street, or the one train on the corner. Like most New Yorkers, they moved quickly, not really giving much of a damn beyond landsharking their way to their preferably air-conditioned destination. But all the ones who turned left, toward the Marble Hill neighborhood that the station serviced, were just shuffling. They barely picked their feet up. You expect that sort of thing to an extent when it's pushing 90 degrees, but not like this. I turned to look at my companion, who regarded me with anxiety. See what I mean, Mr. Gold? It's like you said, like they all started mainlining Prozac or something. Yeah, I nodded. Last time I saw expressions that vacant, it was in a high school. All right, I guess I'll take the case. I probably should back it up a little bit. My new client had called me and made an appointment to see me in my office, identifying himself as Isaiah Daly. He was a tall African-American gentleman arriving for the appointment wearing a New York Yankees t-shirt, khaki shorts, and moccasins. I let him in the front door, which had a nice black engraved nameplate that read Bram Gold, Courser. First thing he asked when he walked in was, "So, Mr. Gold, I have to ask, what is a courser exactly?" I sighed. I always got this when people outside the game hired me. It's a hunting term, actually, and hunting is pretty much what we do. Have a seat and please call me Bram. Daly was fidgeting as he sat down in my guest chair. Why not just call yourselves hunters? I planted myself on the other side of the desk, the chair squeaking as my butt hit the cushion. Well, we used to be called that. Actually, we used to be called Slayers, but then Buffy the Vampire Slayer got popular in the 90s, and everyone thought we were just role-playing or something. So we switched to Hunters, and then Supernatural got popular, and we finally just went with Coursers. We figured no Hollywood writer's going to know what that is. I'm sorry, Mr. Gold, but nobody else is going to know either. I grinned. Good point. And like I said, call me Bram. Anyhow, I'm assuming you didn't make the appointment with me to ask about my job title? No, He hesitated and fidgeted some more, then looked around at the blank gray walls and the big window that had a mostly uninteresting view of the Major Deegan Expressway. Part of why it chose the location on West 230th and Broadway in the northwest Bronx was that it was easy to get to, right off the Deegan, also the one train, about 7 different city bus lines, and the aforementioned Marble Hill Metro North Station. This place is kind of dingy. I winced. Besides the fact that he was stalling some more, he was also hitting a sore point. I don't use this office all that much, truth to be told. I mean, I got it as a mail drop and a place to meet with clients, but all the mail I get is junk. And to be honest, Mr. Daly, you're the first person in 6 months who wanted to see me here. Most of my clients are either regular customers or they don't want to get together in public. I didn't mention that I cleaned the place for the first time in 6 months for the 2 hours before he got here. The place didn't so much have dust bunnies as dust rhinos. Man, was I glad the air conditioner in the window still worked. So what do you... Yeah, sorry, Mr. Gold. Another hesitation. It's not Mr. Daly, it's Reverend Daly. I'm one of the pastors at St. Stephen's. I nodded. St. Stephen's United Methodist Church was one of the oldest churches in the area, and one of the most popular. It had been at that location since the end of the 19th century. For the last week or so, Mr. Gold, lots of folks have been acting weird. Deciding not to make a third offer to drop the formality already, I folded my hands together and sat them on my desk. Define weird, please, Reverend Daly. Just kind of lifeless. Like they're zombies, almost. Actual zombies, or what everyone thinks zombies are like. Daly frowned. I'm sorry? I kept forgetting that not everyone was in the game. Actual zombies are corpses that are animated by a spell, and the person doing the animating has to maintain it, usually from pretty close proximity. They don't actually shamble across the terrain muttering, brains. Well, nobody's casting a spell on them, if that's what you mean. People can do that? Way more than you'd believe. Okay. He seemed nonplussed, not surprisingly. Lots of religious types are in the game. My own knowledge of it came from my rabbi, who's also my aunt, but Methodists tended to be a bit too literal-minded to buy into it. They're all kind of listless, I guess. Just, like you said, shambling? They wander down to the Metro North Station or the one train or whatever, and then they go to work, and then they wander home at the end of the day. The worst thing, though, is that nobody's been showing up for services. I scratched my chin. Nobody? The Reverend shook his head. Been empty since Sunday. I seriously doubted that St. Stephen's ever had a weekday service with no attendance in the century plus since they opened. Hell, I doubt they ever got below a dozen. I assume you went through the usual channels? Oh, yeah. Called the local precinct, and they said people not going to church wasn't a crime, with which I respectfully disagreed. Called Con Ed in case it was, I don't know, a gas leak or something, but they didn't find anything either. Points for thoroughness. So you called me. One of the detectives at the 50th Precinct sent me to you. I smiled. Detective Lyd Toscano wasn't in the game, but she knew about it, and she was more than happy to keep the rest of the NYPD as far away from it as possible. All right. Before I take the case, I'd like to see what's going on for myself. See if it really is in my line. I don't want to take your money and then discover that it's, I don't know, everyone doped up on bad anti-anxiety meds or something. Daly seemed taken aback by that. Really? Thanks. I mean, I brought a checkbook. I figured you'd... Waving him off. It's all right. Last thing I wanted to do was gouge a church. Tough enough to hire someone to fix something you may not even really believe exists, but to take all their money before you even start, that's not how I like to do business. Why don't you meet me at the Marble Hill Metro North Station when the 6:05 train comes in? Daly asked. Back at the Metro North Station, the Reverend asked me if he wanted to go back to my office. Twice in 1 year? I laughed. No, thanks. I quickly quoted him my rates, and he wrote me a check for the first day's work. Sweat dripped off his forehead onto the lower left-hand corner of the check, smudging the memo section. All he'd written there was P.I. Strictly speaking, I wasn't actually a private investigator, but it probably wasn't worth trying to explain that. I was an expert in my field, and I was a licensed courser, which was all that really mattered in this instance. Besides, that was probably an easier sell to the church's bookkeeper. I take it this is something in your line of work? It's a supernatural creature, yeah. Sometimes it didn't pay to beat around the bush. If I'm right, and I'm pretty sure I am, this is a lamprey. Daly frowned. Isn't that a kind of fish? I nodded. Yeah, it's also a fish, but that's a name somebody gave to an animal that sucks the energy out of people. In fact, you know that whole thing from Dracula about how vampires can't cross running water? Yeah. Total horseshit. But lampreys, who are kind of like energy vampires, are the ones who can't do that. Stoker mixed them all up. Holding up both hands and shuddering a bit, Daly asked, "Hang on. Vampires are real too?" "Yeah, but don't worry, they're total wusses." Daly frowned. "What, Stoker's wrong, but Stephanie Meyer's right?" "Not hardly." This time I shuddered. "No, I mean, they're long-lived and they heal most any wound, but they're also weak, sickly, pale people who don't like sunlight very much. Stoker got most of it wrong, and he took the avoids running water thing from lampreys, is all I'm saying." "Damn." Daly let out a very long breath. "Whew. You're seriously messing with what I know of God's world, Mr. Gold." "You came to me, Reverend." "That I did." He shook his head. "Just figure it out, please. I hate preaching to an empty room." He headed in the general direction of St. Stephen's, while I took out my smartphone. Miriam Zarelli was the wardeen of the Bronx. She was in charge of all magical activity on the peninsula. That meant I was she was one of those regular clients I mentioned, and also a handy resource. Of course, I got a voicemail when I called. "Hey, Mimi, could you do me a favor and see if there's any mention in the diaries of a lamprey in Marble Hill?" I spent the next hour following around the various shamblers who came out of Metro North. The first clue that something was up was the simple fact that a tall, dark, and semi-handsome Jewish guy followed them home and they didn't notice. Well, most of them didn't. This one lady who lived on the corner of Adrian and 225th was giving me a nasty look, and she was walking normally, too. And so was a little kid who was riding a tricycle over on Terrace View Avenue. Both of those were on the outskirts of Marble Hill. The neighborhood was pretty tiny as it was. In fact, it was originally part of Manhattan. In the late 19th century, they cut through the land at the south end of Marble Hill, so the Harlem River would run straight across, thus making shipping a whole hell of a lot easier. At first, that made Marble Hill an island, but then around World War I, they filled in the north side and it was physically connected to the Bronx. That also eliminated the object for which the Kingsbridge neighborhood was named, as you now went from there to Marble Hill by traversing a street rather than the King's Bridge over the river. But because it used to be a peninsula, and then an island, it was pretty well enclosed, so it didn't take long to check the whole neighborhood. The southern and western edges, which included St. Stephen's, looked unaffected. Next step was to figure out what the epicenter of the affected area was. Normally I'd need a map, but Marble Hill was only about 1,000 feet by 800 feet or so, and all of it wasn't hit with this potential lamprey. Didn't take long to figure out that the middle was on the 227th Street. What got my attention was the house that had a for sale sign on the front door, along with a local phone number and a website URL. Nobody was home when I went up to the stoop and rang the bell, but I saw plenty of furniture inside. I pulled my smartphone back out of my pocket and checked the website. It belonged to Bronx Realty, a place that specialized in houses in Riverdale, Kingsbridge, Marble Hill, and Inwood. I found the listing for this house, looked it over, and then dialed their number. "Bronx Realty, this is Tara," came a perky voice on the other end. "Hi, my name's Abe Goldblum, and I wanted to inquire about the house on West 227th Street in Marble Hill. Any chance of a viewing this weekend?" "Oh, sure, we'd be happy to." Tara sounded positively overjoyed. "We can't do it tomorrow afternoon, that's when the movers are coming, but any time in the evening or Sunday will work." The movers coming meant the current owners might be present. Even if they weren't, I wanted to get a look at it before they took the stuff away. Or failing that, during. Actually, Saturday afternoon is the only time I can do it. I'm going out of town for a week tomorrow night. Too bad, the place was perfect for what I'm looking for. Oh well. Wait, Mr. Goldblum." Tara sounded a bit panicky, fearing the potential sale slipping through her fingers. "Let's see what we can arrange. Tell you what, would you mind looking at the house while people are moving things?" "Why should I mind?" I grinned. "Say noon?" "Perfect." We exchanged information, and then I disconnected. Tara was no doubt checking my credit history, which was why I had to use my real name. For course of business, I call myself Bram Gold, because, let's face it, that's the name of a guy who can get stuff done. I mean, if you need someone to corral a werewolf, or wrangle a unicorn, or put down a nixie, you're not going to hire some schmuck named Abe Goldblum, am I right? I headed down Marble Hill Avenue to 228th, and then down 228th to Broadway, where I could catch the bus that would take me home. Just as I got to the bus stop, Miriam called me back. I hit talk on my phone and said, "Joe's Pizza, Joe's not here." "You know, Bram, that joke wasn't funny the first 1,000 times. "When has that ever stopped me?" I asked with a chuckle. "I live in hope." Miriam let out a long, suffering sigh. We'd been friends since we were kids, when her dad was the war dean and I was the nephew of her dad's best friend, my aforementioned aunt/rabbi. I have good news and bad news. I've checked back as far as I can, and there haven't been any lampreys in Marble Hill, or anywhere in the domain, since 1914. That's a very specific date, Mimi. Notice that, did you? That's why they pay me the small bucks. Hey, come on, I pay you the same as any courser. I don't even ask for a friend discount. You're all hard. Why the exact date? Because prior to that, Marble Hill was an island that was still considered part of Manhattan. I saw where this was going. Wardine's domains were geographic, not political. Miriam's bailiwick covered not just the Bronx, but most of Westchester County to the north and bits of western Connecticut. Manhattan, though, had its own separate one. So, Miriam concluded, if you want to know anything about prior to the First World War, you gotta talk to Van Owen. I let out a sigh that was even longer in its suffering than the one Miriam had hit me with. I hated dealing with Damien Van Owen. He'd been the Warden of Manhattan since roughly the Mesozoic. He also had trouble with the digital revolution. Miriam was able to get back to me quickly because she had all the Bronx Warden's diaries digitized and searchable. A few keystrokes and she had the answer to my question. But Van Owen's records were still on paper, and sorted in his apartment in Central Park West in nothing like a meaningful fashion. I don't want to talk to Van Owen. He hates me. He hates me, too. That isn't especially comforting. Suck it up, boy chick. I could hear her grin. I winced. Mimi, booby, please, don't bring the Yiddish. Then don't call me Mimi. And she hung up. The bus arrived, and I hopped on, dropping my MetroCard into the slot. As the bus tootled down Broadway, I dialed Van Owen's number. He answered on the first ring, which made me at once happy and chagrined. The former, because it'd move things along. The latter, because I'd have to actually talk to the old bastard instead of just trading voicemails. What do you want, Gold? Charming as ever. I need you to check back and see if there were any lampreys on Marble Hill back before World War I. Don't need to check. Last lamprey sighting in my domain was on Marble Hill in November 1913. Surprised you don't remember, actually, given that one of yours was involved. I frowned. I'm sorry? Elena Hauk. Oy. Oy is one way of putting it, yes. Not exactly the finest hour in courser history, but she had no business being granted a license in the first place. The last thing in the universe I wanted to do was get into an argument with Van Owen. Fine, whatever. April 1913 makes sense since it's in the window. Excuse me? I took some minor pleasure in the high and mighty Damien Van Owen not understanding what I was talking about. The 16-year window between 1898 and 1914, when Marble Hill was an island. Since lampreys can't cross running water, the best plan to trap them is on an island. Yes, Van Owen interrupted testily. I'm familiar with the weaknesses of lampreys. There isn't anything else. I have actual work to do. Knowing this stuff is your work. For my domain, yes. Marble Hill regrettably now falls under the inferior supervision of your friend, Miss Zarelli. So speak to her. Before I could point out that I did speak to her and needed to speak to him to cover the pre-1914 stuff, he hung up on me. That was when I really started giving it to him. Okay, not really, but I thought about it. The only thing that stopped me was that I was on a bus full of people. Not that New York bus riders would think twice about a guy yelling obscenities into a smartphone. I got off at my stop and walked home. Once I got inside, I called Miriam back. This time she answered on the first ring. Don't tell me Van Owen got back to you already. Yep. I filled her in on what her Manhattan counterpart told me. Crap, I should have remembered that. That woman. She sighed. There wasn't another female courser for half a century because of her. I gotta tell you, I know she was the first female courser and the last one until the 60s, but I don't know the specifics. It was a big scandal when she was chosen to be an apprentice. Her tutor was Secundo Tartarone, who was one of the best there ever was. Most of the other coursers and the local wardens thought he was insane for taking her on, and then she got him killed. After that, her first job was to round up a lamprey, and after that she retired, saying she couldn't handle it. Every single woman who tried to be a courser for years was slapped down because Elena Hauk was proof that women didn't have the fortitude. Well, that's a load of crap. Hey, there's a reason why the first black baseball player was also great. If Jackie Robinson stunk up the place, it would have been decades before another black player cracked the major leagues. Why do you think it took 2.5 decades for another viable female candidate in a presidential election after Geraldine Ferraro? If you're going to be a pioneer, you have to not suck at your job, and Elena Hauk was a wretchedly awful courser. I let out a long breath. Miriam obviously felt pretty strongly about this. Not that I blamed her. She was the first of the Bronx wardens to be female, since the first one was assigned back in the 18th century. Of course, that position was hereditary, so gender didn't really enter into how you got the position. She told me she'd email me the Bronx warden's diary entries that mentioned Hauk, as well as the current password for the database, and by the time I fired my laptop up, it was waiting for me. I spent the next half hour reading over what the early 20th century Bronx warden, a crotchety bastard named Gildo Zarelli, Miriam's great-grandfather, had to say about Hauk, none of it good. She'd started her apprenticeship to Tartarone in June 1912, and a year later she was licensed. Mr. Tartarone has explained that the woman he has been seen with is his apprentice, a Miss Elena Hauk. He is not the first to accept an application from a woman, and I dare say that Miss Hauk will fail as all the others did before her. The calling of Slayer is not one for the fairer sex. Miss Hauk's hysterical carelessness has resulted in the untimely demise of Mr. Tartarone during their pitched combat against a water elemental, though the elemental was, at least, cast out. Was called upon by Miss Hauk with an offer of services as a slayer. I provided her with tea, as is civil, but politely refused, as her abilities are not adequate to the task. Although Miss Hauk displayed uncharacteristic cleverness in luring the lamprey to Marble Hill Island, thus effectively trapping it, before putting the creature to death, it was with a profound sense of relief that I learned of her retirement from the ranks of the Slayers. Tartarone's death was in August 1913, not long after Hauk was licensed. She trapped the lamprey on Marble Hill in November 1913, like Van Owen said, and she retired right after that. Meanwhile, I was wondering where this new lamprey came from. I switched over to the password-protected online database that Miriam maintained. The password was only given out at Miriam's discretion, and it changed every hour on the hour, and also changed when someone used it. So the same password never worked twice. Each password was a random collection of capital and lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols. Sadly, there wasn't much on lampreys beyond what I already knew. They sucked energy, and they had about 1 billion teeth, so anytime you tried to wrangle them, they'd bite the living hell out of you. In particular, nobody had recorded anything about their life cycles, methods of reproduction, or anything else useful, beyond the fact that they usually live for about a century, and their gray skin turned white when they were about to die. They weren't all that common around here anyhow. They were mostly found in Europe. In fact, the one Hauk dealt with was assumed to have come over as an egg on one of the many immigrant-bearing boats that hit New York Harbor on either side of 1900. Weirdly, given their aversion to running water, they tended toward damp, dark places. They were sensitive to sunlight, something else they shared with the vamps, more so when hungry for life energy. They'd suck that out of people, sometimes to the point of death. But not always, interestingly enough. I couldn't do much until the next day, so I checked Brock Realty's website again, finding a picture of Tara O'Neill. I knew to look for a blue-eyed blonde with long, curly hair tomorrow. The next day, I put on a button-down shirt from Brooks Brothers and a nice pair of khakis. I wanted to look like I had money to spend, but I didn't want to die in the heat, and trundled down to Marble Hill. Since the appointment was for noon, I made sure to get there at 11:30. When I arrived, 2 harried-looking, dark-haired people, one male, one female, very obviously related as they had the same eyes, nose, and cheekbones, were standing near the stoop. The woman was yelling at 3 burly Latino guys who were gingerly carrying a couch down the stoop while the man was futzing with a smartphone. "Why are you guys moving so slow? Hello? Jesus Christ, you even listening to me?" Without even looking up from his phone, her brother said, "Nobody ever does, sis." "Excuse me?" I said tentatively. "My name's Abe Goldblum. I was supposed to look at the house." "Jesus Christ," the woman said. "That stupid bitch! We told her not to show nobody the house this afternoon." I smiled sheepishly. "Actually, that's my fault. I'm headed out of town tonight, and I honestly don't give a hoot if the movers are here. So I asked if I could come this afternoon. Just want to see what the place looks like." The woman put her hands on her hips. "It ain't convenient, all right?" Finally, looking up from his phone, the man said, "Ignore my sister. Seriously, just totally ignore her. You'll live longer." He put the phone in the pocket of his jeans. He was wearing a tight t-shirt and tight jeans, showing off a too-sculpted physique that looked like it was the result of daily gym workouts. Offering his hand, he said, "I'm Val DeLucci. This is my sister, Sam." I accepted the handshake, shaking harder than he probably expected. I had a decent physique, too, but I preferred to hide that particular light under a bushel, especially since I got it wrangling unicorns and getting beaten up by trolls. "Whoa, that's quite a grip you got there, Mr. Goldblum." "Thanks. So why you guys selling such a nice place?" Sam answered before Val could speak. It ain't ours. Belonged to our grandpa. Crazy old bastard. Never talked to nobody. Wouldn't answer the phone. Wouldn't do nothing. He had Alzheimer's, Val added. No, he didn't. Doctors checked him out, remember? He said he didn't have none of the signs. He was just, I don't know, listless or something. The doctor was full of shit. Excuse my language. He added quickly. I waved it off, and he went on. He was lying. If it was Alzheimer's, he couldn't run more expensive tests, the bastard. I frowned, focusing on the use of the past tense. So he died. Val nodded. Yeah, last week. He was 95. A car pulled up 227th and double parked. Tara had cut her hair since the last she had her picture taken for the realtor's website and straightened it to an above-the-neck bob that probably was more comfortable in the heat. She wore a white blouse and a black miniskirt that showed off a pair of legs that went all the way to the floor. If I had legs like that and I was in the business of selling things, I'd wear miniskirts too. Oh, Mr. Goldblum, you're early. Val, Sam, I'm so sorry. I was hoping to get here early to warn you. It's fine, Val said. No, it ain't. Sam was livid. Look, we don't want nobody seeing all of Grandpa's crap, all right? I waved my hand back and forth. It's fine. You should see all the garbage my old man collected. When Mom and I sold their old place, it was a nightmare. Actually, Mom and Dad had almost nothing in the house, and after they were killed by a golem, the event that led to my current calling, it took all of an hour for me to clean out the place. Tara took me inside, walking past the death glare of Sam and the eye-rolling of Val. It was a very nice Victorian, 4 bedrooms, huge living room, nice dining room, and at the moment a ton of boxes and smelly old furniture. After looking around downstairs and upstairs and making all the right noises, including complaining about the kitchen, which looked like it hadn't been remodeled since Eisenhower was president, I asked, "Can I see the basement?" "I don't think it's finished," Tara said weakly. "And there was a lot of stuff stored down there, so you really won't get much of a sense of it until the movers are..." It's fine. I want to see it. I like basements, and I'll probably want to finish it and make it a workroom. It took another 30 seconds of cajoling, but Tara finally remembered that the customer was always right, and she led me to the dark, creaky wooden staircase near the kitchen that led into the bowels of the house. Mildew and mustiness assaulted my nostrils as I went down the stairs, Tara's high heels clacking behind me. The house was built into the hill, so the front of the basement was at street level. That end was mostly boxes, some in pretty wretched shape. 2 things caught my eye, only one of which I was in a position to do something about now. The first, which I left alone, was the trapdoor built into the floor. I did not want to open that while half a dozen civilians were wandering around. The other, though, was a box that had a label that looked like it was typed with a manual typewriter. It was faded, but I could make out the words, Elena Hauk. At this particular thickening of the plot, I turned to Tara. "Does that say Elena Hauk?" She bent over and peered at it. "I think so. Why?" "I need to talk to Val and Sam." I ran upstairs, a confused Tara following soon after. Sam was bitching at the movers for moving so slowly, though I had a feeling that they weren't doing so on purpose, if what I thought was under that trapdoor was under it. I looked at Val. "I'm sorry to bother you, Mr. DeLucci, but there's a box downstairs that has a name on it." "Yeah, our great-grandma's shit. Excuse my language. She was Elena DeLucci after she married our great-granddad, obviously, but Hauk was her maiden name. Grandpa never let us touch her stuff, and it's all covered in mildew. Honestly, we were just going to throw it out. It's useless trash." "Do you mind if I take a look in the box? See, I'm kind of a genealogy buff, and there's this one relative we've never been able to find out anything about. Her name's Elena Hauk. And she lived somewhere in the Bronx after First World War. But that's it. I'd love to see if it's her." Val looked over at his sister, who was still haranguing the movers, now taking a coffee break. "If you want, yeah, go ahead, I guess. Just, don't breathe through your nose." I grinned, grateful for kids who don't care about the past. "Thanks!" Dashing back down the creaky stairs, I easily ripped open the decades-old paper tape that weakly held the box shut. Opening it, my nose was, as expected, assaulted by mold and mildew. Lots of yellowed paper, jewelry, mothballed clothes, and weapons. There was what was once a very nice crossbow, but with rusted metal and warped wood. A few daggers, also rusted, and a rapier that had rust and pits in the metal. This was obviously where Elena Hauk had packed away her life as what was then called a slayer, before marrying some guy named DeLucci and becoming a wife and mother like everybody told her she was supposed to. but that still left the question of the lamprey. I found a leather-bound book that had a rusted lock on it. Even if there had been a key in evidence, it probably wouldn't have worked. Val came down the stairs. Christ, what is all that? Some rusted old stuff. I tried to sound dismissive. Mind if I borrow this? I know someone who might be able to get this lock off. That someone was going to be one of the spellcasters I knew, but he didn't need to be told that part. Sure, Val shrugged. Like I said, we were just going to throw it out anyhow. Bunch of old crap, you know? Thanks. I'll drop it off today, and it should be open by the time I get back from my trip. I made a show of looking at some more of the house, then took my leave. Tara wished me a safe flight, as did Val. Sam made me very grateful for the lack of laser vision in the real world, since I'd have been zapped right there. As soon as I was out of sight of the house, I whipped out my phone. I knew a mess of spellcasters who could do this, but the only ones who weren't pissed at me, on vacation, or already on a job they couldn't come away from were Teitelbaum, who wouldn't be working on a Saturday afternoon, and Velez. I sighed. I hated having to call Velez. By the time the bus brought me back up to my townhouse, I had spoken to Velez, and he said he was on his way. I also called Miriam and told her about my find. When I got home, I changed into a t-shirt and denim shorts and sat down at the computer. I answered a few emails until the doorbell rang and I buzzed Velez in. I lived in a three-bedroom flat on the second floor of the 3-apartment townhouse that I owned, with my cousin renting out the 1-bedroom space on the first floor and the top floor used for storage and a home office. Jose Velez slowly ambled up the stairs, huffing and puffing as he hauled his 350 pounds against gravity. When I showed him the locked diary and explained that I needed him to crack it open, he peered at me over the glasses like he was an angry teacher or something. There's a locksmith that's like 2 blocks from here, yo. The hell you haul my fat ass up here for? The diary belonged to Elena Hauk. Was that your ex-girlfriend or something? I sighed. History's just a feature on your web browser, isn't it? Kiss my entire ass, Gold. Hauk was the first female courser. Whoop-de-doo. Can we do this? I got places to be. I stared at him. If you got places to be, why'd you take my call? Velez pointedly didn't answer, instead digging into his shoulder bag. He started setting out what he'd need. Pestle, bottles of herbs, New York Yankee Zippo, a stick, and 3 different bottles of water. He put 2 of the latter back after staring at the labels. What, they're not all holy water? I asked snidely. He regarded me with his usual annoyance. Very funny. Now, for this I needed the swamp water to soak the poplar root in. I chuckled. Holy water didn't work the way most folks thought it did, something that really disappointed people who tried splashing it onto vampires. They only did damage if the vamp was wearing a silk shirt. As for the poplar root, even I knew that was a taproot, one that would go through concrete to find water. It was perfect for breaking through something. Velez dumped some herbs and the stick into the pestle, then poured in the swamp water. Then he lit the Zippo and ran the flame under the pestle. I sniffed. That mint? Nodding, Velez started murmuring something I couldn't make out. Spells were out of my league. Or in a different league, really. I left that to specialists like Velez. After a few seconds, I heard a clicking sound, and the diary fell open. There you go. So I gotta ask, what's the magical power of mint? Makes your iced tea taste better, Velez said with a grin. I just add that up in there so it don't stink. Swamp water's nasty, yo. I wrote Velez a check for his services, but he didn't leave. You think I'm opening this and ain't finding out what's on the inside? I rolled my eyes. Fine, whatever. I opened the diary up. The first page I turned to had a detailed description of Hauk taking down a werewolf. Tartarone incapacitated from wine, as usual, and I was once again forced to hunt for him. Werewolf proved susceptible to steel bullets, much as silver ones, since Tartarone's too taken with drink to provide location of latter. That wasn't the part that blew me away. It was the date. The 14th day of April, the year of our Lord, 1910. A good 3 years before her official apprenticeship started. I flipped through some more pages, which told of other exploits that most people probably thought were committed by Tartarone, but were in fact thanks to Elena Hauk. Tartarone, in one of his more lucid moments, has decided that I must be officially apprenticed. It is the only way to appease Zarelli, who grows suspicious of my presence. If I am to continue to act during Tartarone's ever-increasing bouts of intoxication, I must become a proper slayer. Shit, Velez muttered as he read over my shoulder. People really talk like that? Shrugging, I said, different time. I kept flipping pages. Then I walked out the door while dialing Miriam. Velez lumbered down the stairs behind me. Where the hell are you going? You know any spells that can stop a lamprey? Can imprison one for 3 days, but only if you got some more mint, because that one stinks bad. We'll have to live with it. Where'd you park? Excuse me? You want to follow along? I said as I went out the sidewalk. You can drive me down to 227th between Van Corlear and Adrian. Shit. Velez led me to his bright red 3000 GT. I hopped in the passenger seat while he squeezed his massive frame into the tiny driver's seat. I never understood why a guy the size of Mount Rushmore owned an automobile that was only slightly bigger than a Matchbox car. Miriam finally answered. What is it, bro? You're not going to believe this. I filled her in on what I'd read about Eleanor Houck while Velez blazed down Johnson Avenue. Thing is, she didn't get Tartarone killed. She'd been carrying his drunk ass for years. When he did get killed, it was because he was so toasted he was belligerent and forced her to take him with her when she went after the water elemental. That's not possible, Bram. Secundo Tartarone was one of the finest coursers ever. No, Eleanor Houck was, and pretending it was Tartarone, while the finest courser ever drank himself into an early grave. And that's not the kicker. Jesus, Velez, that's a red light. You're in a car with Velez? Miriam sounded understandably concerned. He got the locked diary open, and besides, I need to get back down to the house faster than the bus will take me. See, the lamprey she claimed to put down, she didn't. It was an infant, and Eleanor couldn't bring herself to kill it. She left a lamprey alive? I nodded, even though she couldn't see that over the phone. She couldn't kill a baby animal that was totally defenseless. Hadn't developed any teeth yet. So she took it in. She hadn't been getting much work as a corsa anyhow, since everyone assumed she was the incompetent who got the great Secundo Tartarone killed. So, what? She left the lamprey alive as a pet? Sorta. Velez was driving down Kingsbridge Avenue to where the King's Bridge used to be. Now it was just Marble Hill Avenue. It lived in the basement under a trapdoor, and she and her family kept feeding it enough life energy to survive, but not to hurt anyone. And that was all well and good, but her son just died last week at the ripe old age of 95, and the rest of the family moved out. Everyone thought the old man had Alzheimer's, but he didn't test for it. It was the lamprey. Uh-huh. This place with the for sale sign, I said to Velez as he drove down 227th. Yeah, the lamprey just took from him until he started losing it. Now it's just sucking energy from wherever it can now that its principal food source is dead. We're there, Mimi. I gotta go. I'll keep you posted. You better. Velez parked right behind the moving truck. Sam DeLucci was now chatting amiably with her brother, and the movers were doing their work at a much brisker pace. Sam's amiability dropped as soon as she saw me, of course. The hell are you doing here? I thought you were flying somewhere or something. I ignored her and talked to Val. I need to get back into the basement, now. I don't understand. Val looked back and forth to me and Velez. Who's this guy? Just call me the exterminator, Velez said with an unpleasant smile. Not helping, I muttered. Look, there may be something bad down there. Trust me, you want to sell this place? Let me see what's down there, and let my friend the exterminator, take care of it. Sam moved to stand in front of the stoop while Val dithered. No way. I don't know who you think you are, but you already seen the place, and I ain't even sure you're a real buyer. I started to tell my cover story, and then stopped. This whole thing started because Eleanor Houck couldn't tell the truth about her own abilities as a courser, or that her mentor was a drunk. And I've been compounding it by lying to get into this house. Enough already. There's a creature who's been feeding on people in this neighborhood for the past week. Your grandfather inherited it from your great-grandmother, who kept it as a pet down in the basement. Now, though, I'm worried about it. What is it? Val asked. What the fuck are you talking about? Sam interrupted. Velez hauled out his shoulder bag. Hell with this. He pulled out some ash and threw it in Sam's face. She coughed and then stopped moving completely. Val panicked. What'd you do to her? She'll be fine in about an hour, Velez said. Come on, Gold, let's do this. I stared at Sam's still form for a second before following Velez up the stairs. Val was still agog and didn't acknowledge our entry into the house. As I led the way down a creaky stairs, I asked, will she really be okay in an hour? Velez shrugged. She'll have a bitch of a migraine and ain't no detergent in the world gonna get that stuff out of her clothes, but yeah, she'll be alright. Unless she's allergic to shellfish. Then she'll probably get a rash. Before I could respond to that, the smell hit me. You know what a dead skunk smells like? This odor made me nostalgic for that. I went straight for the trap door I'd seen before. Opening it, the smell got much worse. Putting his hand over his nose and mouth, Velez said, Shit, ain't enough mint in the world! Looking down into a good-sized crawl space, I saw the long, snake-like form and giant teeth-filled mouth of a lamprey. It was surrounded by several well-worn cushions, a pipe that dripped water. Lampreys took in moisture through the skin, so that was the equivalent of a water bowl for it, and a few other decorations that made it clear this wasn't just a lair for the lamprey. This was the home of a beloved pet. The lamprey was also white, not gray. As soon as I opened the trapdoor, it raised its head toward me and bared its teeth. I started to feel listless. It was sucking the life energy right out of me. Fatigue started to smother me like a blanket, but I couldn't even work up the energy to care. Then it looked at Velez, who was smiling. "Bring it on, bitch!" My own energy level started to improve. The lamprey was obviously focused on Velez. After a second, it let out a high-pitched wail and then collapsed in the crawl space, unmoving. Peering into it, Velez nodded. "That is one dead motherfucking lamprey." "What'd you do?" I asked. "Nothing. Just let it chow down. The thing is whiter than you, so I knew it was too old to handle my mojo." Right. Spellcasters had considerably more life energy than the average person, and the lamprey probably gorged on Velez. I should have been glad. I'd been hired to get rid of a lamprey, and now it was gone. Okay, I didn't actually do anything. Velez did, but still, mission accomplished. The lamprey wouldn't be sucking the energy out of people in Marble Hill. Between us, Velez and I would dispose of the corpse. Then I'd call Reverend Daly and tell him he'd probably start getting folks back in St. Stephen's before too long. But I still felt like crap. Eleanor Houck looked past what everyone was saying and saw a helpless creature. The same people who told her she had to kill it were the ones who told her she was the lousiest courser around. So she showed it compassion instead, and it lived a long and happy life. But when her son died, nobody knew about it. Another lie, even though it was of omission. "So, want me to incinerate this puppy?" Velez asked. "No." "Say what?" "I said no," I snapped. "Let's give this guy a burial. Least he deserves. Least Eleanor deserves." Velez shrugged. "Whatever, yo. Just as long as I get paid." Yeah. What he just did was above and beyond opening a lock, so he'd demand more money. Probably eat up most of my fee from Reverend Daly, but maybe I could justify hiring him as one of the expenses. I gently pulled the corpse out of the crawl space. The lamprey would get a proper burial. And Eleanor Houck would get a proper legacy. Damn it. You can get this story in Without a License, my short story collection, which has a whole bunch of other cool stories, original stories of mine. You can get A Furnace Sealed from Wordfire Press. It's available from all the usual online dealers. And it's the first book in the series. There's a unicorn on the cover and an elevated subway behind it. And again, I'm working on book 2 right now. It doesn't have a title yet, but it's coming along, and I'm hoping to have that out within the next year or so. Check me out online, DeCandido.net. Check out my blog, DeCandido.wordpress.com. Subscribe to this YouTube channel so you can be alerted when I do more readings. Support me on Patreon, patreon.com/KRAD, and please, 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 please stay safe. Thank you very much.